operations. Now, the government of Uganda had, under Museveni, of course, the dictator, had said that they will invest something like 400 million US dollars to acquire a few planes and then start its operations. Now, for them, they thought that, okay, a lot of money goes through Entebbe airport. Around, I think they said around 80,000 passengers go through the airport. That contributes to millions of dollars that goes to different aircrafts, the likes of Emirates, Kenya Airways, and so on and so forth. So the government said that, I think we can have a share of that cake. And they said, okay, if we have our own airline, Ugandans will actually prefer their own airline than other airlines. Number one. The other issue, they thought that, government, these government guys, the leaders, the people in government, ministers, blah, 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 and whenever they are going for foreign trips, they should use Uganda Airline, the national aircraft. And they also banked on the issue of tourists, that if any tourist is coming to Uganda, they would easily have direct flights from wherever they are coming from. Like, I think they have direct flights from Dubai and also direct flights from London, because they secured landing rights in these places early this year. Now, all those would have been good if at all the government of Uganda did not have any competition. Now, in the region where we are, especially in Africa, one of the strongest airlines is Ethiopian Airline. They mastered the art on how to run an airline, and no other African country has matched their way of doing things. Now, Kenya Airways has been also in the region struggling. Tanzania Airways has been struggling. Rwanda Air has been struggling. South African Airlines struggling. Egyptian Air struggling. Nigerian Air revived but struggling. And then you bring Uganda Airlines. Now that's really interesting, because that's why you at times think that, who are the people that really advise this Museveni guy? Because how can you invest 400 million, of which that is not the only losses you're going to make, but on top of the 400 million, you're still going to add in more money in order to keep the airline afloat. Now, it was projected that the airline would make a few losses, but in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, it will start making profits. And then COVID happened. Now, when COVID happened, we spent almost 6 months of aircrafts standing still and not flying. And you know very well, an airplane that is not flying is not making money. And if it is not making money, it is losing money. As simple as that. We have seen so many budget airlines here in Europe and America closing down as a result of COVID-19. Now, the aircrafts in Uganda had to be serviced and all this kind of thing. Even without COVID, they would have struggled, because Uganda Airlines had no competitive advantage. One of its trademark items that it uses to advertise when the people are boarding the airline is a Rolex. A Rolex is not a watch in Uganda. A Rolex is a chapati, something like a flat bread with a few eggs and a few cabbage and tomatoes and in there. And then they serve that one on the airline. Now, so many things I would have talked about the airline, but I want to give you an update on what is going on. Now, yesterday, I think, what happened was Uganda Airlines announced that in a statement, this has been uploaded on Twitter, they said, the board of directors of Uganda Airlines wish to inform our esteemed clients and the general public that some members of our management team have taken leave. During their absence, the roles will continue to be performed by the organization in line with the human resource policies. All operations continue normally. Thank you. Pereza Godfrey Ahebwa, Chairman, Board of Directors. Now, this is what happened. Uganda Airlines hired one of the best CEOs in running airlines in sub-Saharan Africa. Like they said, he's called Conwell Muleya. Now, Conwell Muleya is a Zambian. whom they hired to run the aircraft ever since it was revived, and he has been the man in charge. Now, all of a sudden, he has been fired, citing mismanagement, corruption, and so many other things. Now, according to, this is the gentleman called Conwell Muleya. Now, according to the airspaceafrica.com, Uganda Airlines CEO fired amid huge shakeup at the state-owned carrier. Unease, shock, and nerves described the current mood at Uganda Airlines, where a shakeup is currently underway. According to sources, the top hierarchy, including the CEO, Conwell Muleya, have been sent packing after a dramatic intervention by the minister, by the transport minister, General Katumba Wamala, on orders from the State House. State-owned media has reported that up to 10 of Uganda Airlines top management, including the CEO, financial director, head of security, and human resource director, have gone on a 3-month leave. But the move, according to a source, is due to allegations of corruption, mismanagement, and poor performance within the state-owned entity, and will allow for a full investigation into the matter. An acting CEO, Captain Stephen Wegoye, has been appointed to oversee the transition. Both the transport minister and the head of Uganda Airlines board have maintained in a response of state-owned media that the entire management team has simply taken their accumulative leave. This at a time when the airline is stepping up operations for route expansions to Johannesburg and a network of to long-haul destinations in the Middle East, Europe, and Asia. Now, earlier this year, the Ugandan Auditor General presented a report to the country's parliament, which identified the airline as the country's worst-performing state-owned entity. The carrier made a loss of 102 billion Ugandan shillings from 27 billion Ugandan shillings. 102 billion Ugandan shillings, that is 27 million US dollars, in the previous financial year. Now, just to let you know, a year before that, the airline, when it was opened up, it made a loss of 20 billion Ugandan shillings. Now, that was an increase of more than 100% in terms of losses. Now, remember, the government of Uganda spent something like 400 million US dollars to revive this airline. Now, the Auditor General noted that 10 state enterprises had debt ratios of more than 50%, implying that their total assets were insufficient to cover their total debt. This list included the Uganda Civil Aviation Authority with a gearing ratio of 51.17% in 2018-2019 financial year and a ratio of 48.8% in the 2019 and 2020 financial year. The Uganda National Airlines Company Limited had a gearing ratio of 2.37 in 2018 financial year and a ratio of 0.48 in 2019-2020 financial year. Now, what that means is that the debts are even more, the debts that Uganda Airlines have are even more, what do you call it? That the debts are more valuable than the entire airline itself, because they used 400 million to buy the airline, to recover it, to revive it. Now, the government of Uganda, I think, contributed 70 million Ugandan shillings, and then they borrowed 370 million US dollars, and then the government of Uganda borrowed 330 million US dollars from different lenders. In fact, they approached the Canadian bank where they bought these aircrafts from, the Canadian government, and refused to give them a loan. Now, what this means is, according to the Auditor General's report, that even the debt that Uganda Airlines has is more valuable than the airline itself. Now, I don't know what sort of business that is, where the debt is even more valuable than the loss, according to the debt ratios. Now, but in the media release, the airline denied the existence of any form of debt, saying Uganda Airlines is fully capitalized by shareholders and has no debt. Unfortunately, as Ugandans, we don't know any of those shareholders. On its balance sheet, all the aircraft and other assets were paid for by cash from the shareholders. Uganda Airlines therefore doesn't have any loans or interest payments to any financier. They denied. But the airline is in debt. Look here. Right now, Uganda is drowning in debt. We are almost hitting our debt ratio of 50%. We are at 75, I think, 0.7%. In fact, Museveni is calling on his lenders to postpone the debt repayment. Now, what happens whenever they postpone debt repayment with Museveni? He goes back and asks for more loans, which is really interesting. So when we hit that threshold of 50%, it means that the Ugandan economy will no longer be able to borrow money, and the economy will come crashing in one way or the other. But this is important for the Uganda Airlines, because these things they should have known earlier. Now a lot of money is going into so many things, and it is said that these people, whenever they were purchasing things, the things they purchased were like 3 times more than the real price. But that is not right. The other issue is the firing of the CEO Muleya is that the government is trying to cut losses. The airline is already making losses, and so they have to cut more losses, because the CEO these are the top people that take a lot of money. Human resource, finance, the CEO, they take a lot of money. So you have to fire them. Now, when you fire them, you have to bring in someone that you have to pay less. There's a saying that goes, buy cheap, buy more. Like the more you buy cheap stuff, the more you are most likely to go back and buy again. Buy cheap, buy again. That's the saying. So the government is going to hire a cheap CEO. But basically, Museveni is going to hire someone who is related to him and something of that sort to run the airline, who is actually going to technically bring it to its complete demise. And that is going to happen because most of these people don't know how to even run an airline. The transport minister himself has a military background, who doesn't know anything at all on how to run transport and all this kind of thing. Now, we also know that there is too much government interference in airlines. The reason why the Ethiopian airline has managed to survive all this time is because there is no government interference. So many things can happen in Ethiopia,